Okay, so let's just stand without the arms first. And then as you bring the arms up into ward off, into riding horse, just feel how that forces you to sort of lean back a little bit. So you get that angle in the back that's going down the legs. So we want a heavy sacrum, but not a heavy sacrum that's settling down behind you like this, but one that travels down the legs. So in other words, forwards a little bit as well as down. And then just start it moving side to side a little bit. And just feel the legs. The legs are sort of springy. Springy and elastic. So you sink into the leg and it throws you out. You sink into the other leg and the one you've left just pulls you back in because it's elastic. Yeah, so both legs are working. One is pulling you and one is sort of pushing you. It's not really a push, it's more like a sort of spring. So I'm compressing one leg, compressing one leg and stretching the other. So we'd like to feel relaxation as being almost like an active expansion. It's not just the removal of tension. When something relaxes, it will actively open up. Feel the feet on the ground. So it really is coming from there. It's coming from that connection that you have with the ground. Yeah, so to start with, you just feel the ground as this sort of hard surface that you're purchasing on, either to push or to pull. But eventually the ground, it just becomes really sort of fluid. And so as you push the ground, it feels as though you're penetrating it and squeezing underneath. And as you pull the ground, it actively starts pulling you back. So everything takes on this sort of springy, spongy, elastic quality, not just you. Sacrum sinking through the legs. So just feel the two sides of the sacrum. This side touches the ground, and then this side touches the ground. And that limb of energy that comes out to touch the ground passes through the leg. Yeah, so to really get down, that it just really requires you to bring the mind into the Dan Chen, and that just requires the lower back to feel as though it's curving backwards, like your Min Meng is pushing right back. So you're almost sort of collapsing into the Dan Chen. Just think of Neanderthal man, dressed in his animal skins, prowling a mountainside, hunting, keeping a low profile. So legs that keep you low, legs that keep your belly close to the ground, rather than legs that extend your head upwards. Okay, and now let's just bring it back. So just feel the sacrum coming down like that. So down the angle of the thigh, because the knees are forward, so the thigh is sloping down like that. And just feel just how much you can actually just sink down into that. Yeah, this is what John was like. You know, when we're in Blakeney, he could just disappear. Yeah, it just goes right down into the posture, like fluid legs. Yeah, legs that were no longer stiff props holding him up; they were just completely fluid. Okay, now let's just breathe it, because this helps the lower back. So just get it going to start with. Yeah. So despite what we do, just keep the sinking. You want to keep this feeling of the spine going down towards the knees, and then just start this action. And just feel the spine. So we're breathing with our lungs, but we're also breathing with the spine. So the spine is extending, and then the spine is flexing, so it's curving this way now. All the time, just feeling the feet. Should feel really big. and wide, you know, like a duck's feet. Tai has a friend who's never worn shoes, and her feet are just enormous, so wide, they're almost as wide as they are long, and she can walk on anything. So when I first came here, Israelis would delight at laughing at my English feet, my white, narrow, crushed toe feet. And then just feel the in-breath. So as you breathe in, you're sucking air in through the nostrils, obviously, but also imagine you're sucking energy up the legs into the dantian. So the air that comes in here, it comes into your lungs, obviously, but you imagine it's coming down to your dantian as well. So there's this meeting. As you breathe in, the chi from the air and the chi from the ground are coming in and meeting in the belly. And then you expel them. All the time, just relaxing down into the ground. So if you really sink and relax, you can't think, because that connection with the ground just drains any activity in the head. So this action becomes really intense, yeah, because basically thinking inhibits and interrupts action. So if you're thinking, you can't act properly. So basically, we start thinking when the action that we're engaged in seems to be easy enough for us not to have to concentrate. So when something gets boring, the mind wanders and starts thinking. So we want the work to take us into the realm of boredom, but not get bored. Okay, now let's just bring it back. Okay, so this, again, when we come into our posture, our stationary riding horse, the first thing you do is just make sure this is forwards of where it's gone. Because normally when we do something, it goes back a little bit because we're looking down on what we do. You want the real feeling that you're in the middle. You're not behind a space that you control. You're in the thick of it. You're right in the middle. Okay, now just consider what you see. Just, eyes ahead, but, how far can you see? I can just about see my arms now, if I keep my eyes ahead. So that is my domain, if you like. That's the reality that I spill into when I advance. And now consider what's behind you. It's almost like, like when someone creeps up on you from behind, you can feel it. It's sort of this sort of creepy feeling in your back. And so that's how we feel what's behind us. We want this real sense that there's an enormous, that this is actually really quite limited. Our real world, if you like, is behind us. It's dark because we don't see it. But it's just full of energy. This is full of objects. So we're trained from birth to discard energy and give objects and things more importance. So we see things within our vista, but behind we feel energy. So this is the reality of Tai Chi. This isn't. So what we're trying to do in Tai Chi is actually reduce this and bring it around. So my world is now contained purely here. And the world of energy is now everything that's beyond that. So when I'm standing, I'm limiting myself in order for my energy being to become dominant. So it's exactly the same like in seated meditation, where they're like this and they've got this really sort of pulled in chin and they're looking down just naturally about a meter in front. This has just become really sort of closed off so that they're back. I mean, like in Soto Zen, they actually face the wall, don't they? So all their backs in the room are facing each other because all these students are around the room facing the wall. So it's the back that's important. So this is the student's job is to just limit this, is to just wrap it up, put it in prison, put it to bed, and then just trust that this will actually open up. And it's, when students say, oh, I can't feel energy, I think, well, or they'll say, I'm not sure whether I really felt it or I imagined it. So, well, it's the same thing, It's that, we're dealing with that gray area, that indefinable, the invisible, the impossible. So just melting down through the legs. And it's just, the limiting factor is always that strength in the legs, just how much can you sink? Okay, now let's just try this one. So just the same as what we were doing before, really, but now just bringing the foot up. And so it's not really the foot coming up that's important, it's when it goes down again. We're just emphasizing the feet, really. So as the foot goes down, the toes go down, and then I draw myself into it. This feeling that the leg is actually pulling the ground towards me. In other words, pulling me down towards the ground, rather than propping me up by straightening. Again, just feel the lower back. You want the min-meng pressing back. So your whole body is a real unit. It's a ball. You're a ball that's rocking, rolling from side to side. It's like you've got underneath this sort of rubbery skin that's stretched across the floor. So there's this skin that's pulling you down all the time. And as soon as that image breaks, dispels, it's because you've thought to yourself. I mean, a lot of the thinking that we do is invisible. We're not even aware of it. But it will always require us to disconnect in order for it to happen. And in Tai Chi, it's, you know, the things we are connected with are the ground and the person we're working with. So those are our important connections. So here, just really, just feel that skin just pulling you into the leg. If that pressure releases, it's because I'm thinking. And just feel the two sides. There's always one side that's better than the other. So just look at the bad side. You know, why is it not as good? Is it because I've got an injury in my knee? Is it because that's the side that I think with? Okay, and now keeping it just as sunk, just bringing it back. Min Meng still pushing back. So in other words, the belly pulling in slightly. Sacrum still blending into the legs. And just feel the rocking that's still going on in your energy. Yeah, so any exercise that you do sort of wholeheartedly will basically destabilize you. So when you come back to here, you'll feel a bit shaky and trembly, and that's a good sign. We don't want to become stable by removing richness, removing detail. So this is why symmetry, you know, symmetry isn't too, basically a symmetrical image is got limited information, it's got limited richness. You know, okay, just feel the sacrum, feel that central line. Although you're like this, you're very much filling the room as much behind you as you are in front. So your energy comes out the spine like a cardioid, yeah? Like this shape. So from behind, from my shoulder blades and like the angel's wings, and then it's coming around. So these angel's wings are sort of furling around me. And also here, and also here. Yeah, so as John used to say, you know, basically to succeed at Tai Chi is all you have to do is find something that's more interesting than you are to yourself. And that's basically just the world of energy. Yeah. So soon, when the student opens up to that, and then that becomes their primary interest, then it's like progress is assured. Okay, now let's just turn. Again, just feel the central line of the sacrum, and now just turn around it. Yeah. What we want to get away from is being clumsy and stupid. So normally when we turn, we think we're turning from the hips, but actually we're turning from the shoulders, yeah, which is evidenced by the fact that the person's shoulders will move a lot further than their hips. Yeah. So we want to feel that we're really moving from the sacrum, and the shoulders are just going along for the ride, and the head with the shoulders. Yeah. So people will think, oh, if I move my head round, I can go a bit further, but that's, you just become out of line. So you're just turning around the sacrum and just open, just easing it up. So as you turn, you just manage to get around like a millimeter further each time. All the time, the sacrum has to try and remain relatively relaxed so that it can almost feel free within the space that it's in. So it's not gripped too forcefully by the hip bones, which are the tops of your legs. So almost feels like your sacrum is floating in space. And then again, just get down to the feet. Just feel, how am I making this turn? Yeah. So what's happening to turn? If I want to turn this way, basically what's happening, I'm pushing the ground with my foot, and that's pushing this hip around. And then if I only do that, then it will push me across like that. I don't want that, I want to turn. So this foot has to push the ground in order to push this hip round. So basically, I'm just using both legs at the same time. One pushing one hip and the other pushing the other hip. And that's forcing the turn. So I'm trying to keep the sacrum just still in the middle. And so you start off just getting the hips going really easy. And then just let it, with the sinking, your attention will just move down to the feet. And what we want to try and feel is this bit at the edge. Can I relax and just let that go around a little bit further? So rather than it becoming really tight and twisted at the edge, something in me releases and I just go around a little bit further. So something here just, I just release. And it's a real sinking. Yeah. So for that final part of the turn, you need to really sink. I need to just release and just sink down. And then when I turn back, I'll come up naturally a little bit. So when I'm stuck in the middle, I'm higher. So it's a bit like going up and down over a hill. Here I sink to the valley one side, and then I push up the hill. And then here I sink down the valley, the other side of the hill. Whoa. And then just keep the attention on the feet. And now just feel the twisting of the feet. Yeah. So when I push the ground with this foot in order to come back, I don't just push the ground. Otherwise, that would tend to send this hip backwards. Yeah. What I do, I twist the foot. I twist the foot, and then that rolls the hip round. And then I twist this foot. And just feel how fine and delicate that twisting is. It's so different from just pushing. There's something very coarse about pushing because, of course, it's always forceful. So here I twist the foot, and that just rolls me around. Yeah. So now that is fine. So as you come out of the leg, as you start turning back to the front, that's got that fineness of the twisting. But then as I settle into this foot now, that's a bit coarse because it's just this sort of heavy weight just dropping. So I want that to happen because I start twisting this foot this way. This is the difficult one. So this twist is relatively easy, but then this twist is difficult. Because the two twists, the twisting out and the twisting in of the toes, it's like they come from different parts of your mind. This comes from your yielding mind, your big, enveloping, embracing mind. And this comes from your attacking mind, your forceful mind. So I've got to switch. I have to switch from attacking mode, the mode of coming out of the center, to the mode of being in the circumference and embracing. Very different minds. Yeah? So as I pass through the middle here, I'm changing my mind. I'm switching to a different mind. And ooh. And then just seeing how the embrace, the yield becomes the attack. So here I'm yielding, I'm enveloping, I'm embracing, and then I just collapse that into a center from which there is an explosion, which is the coming out. And as the explosion dissipates, my mind is now in the circumference, which can then come back in. So it's just waving hands in the clouds, but from the ground and from twisting the foot. So when you twist the foot to turn the waist, you basically, you guarantee that the turn is the first thing that will happen, because the turn is the first thing that's happening in the foot. If you push or pull with the foot, you can just guarantee that the turn will happen after the movement. So this is me exploding from a sense of self, and this is my dark energy enveloping the situation. Like the angel's wings, this is me, like my ego sort of exploding, and now my wings from behind furl around and embrace my space. Ooh. All the time, the sacrum is trying to be relaxed and just to hang and seep through the legs. Yeah, so there's a whole so there's lots of energies, lots of forces operating. We just have to somehow keep them in balance. And that's the compassionate mind. That's the mind that we use. So we don't think, we equilibrate. And that equilibration generates feeling, and that feeling sparks the imagination. And so we see things and we feel things. And that's what it means to be human, really. Yeah, so for so long, we've sort of prided ourselves that we're superior to other animals because we can think, because we have language. But really, when you look at an animal, the best part of us is the part that we share with it, not the part that they don't have. Because it's what we share that makes us able to communicate and connect. So when you look at a cat or a dog, they're just people, really. Got the same feelings. There's something John said to me once. He said, I can only teach Celts. So people who just have a sense for the crack, a sense of, they'll have a laugh, sort of wildness. So ones that already have a handle on what it means to have spirit rather than thinking as their dominant way of interacting with the world. And he also said, I can only teach poets. And for him, a poet wouldn't necessarily be a person who writes poetry, but a person who appreciates poetry, a person who reads poetry. Ooh. Okay, and now back to riding horse. And just register how you feel different. So we'd like riding horse to not be quite so statuesque. So it's not quite so stiff. It's really contains all this movement. So it contains this and what we were doing before, and now it's got this sort of shifting one way, shifting the other. So that sense of yielding, that sense that one side of your body is yielding and the other side is advancing. And that you contain, yield, and attack all the time. You're not just in one mode. And this just melting. So the more we work, the tireder we get, and the more melty we feel. You start sweating. So it's like you are melting. You're becoming liquid. So this sense that you're flowing down into the legs. You're no longer just perched on your pedestal, which is your stiff legs. And almost feeling a little giddy, sort of almost intoxicated. Like you've had a glass of wine and everything's just sort of woozy. And a sense of real concentration here and a real expansion here, like your head's about to explode. And then just sink. So just get through the legs. Yeah? But you almost feel like you're in seated meditation. You're actually you're sitting on the ground. Yeah? Yeah, so the main thing we get wrong, when we're standing and when we're sitting and when we're walking, is that we lead with the head. So the head tips forwards a little bit. So the spine is either tilting forwards or the spine is buckling, which gives the head this sort of forward drift. So that's what we really have to guard against. Yeah, so this is why we get the bum in. So you think, the main instruction in Tai Chi, bum in. For John, that was the most important thing. And the main instruction in meditation, when you're sitting there you're sitting down on a cushion, is chin in. So you're pulling the chin in like this. So what this is doing is lengthening the neck, the same way that when you get your bum in properly, it's lengthening the lower back. So that your cervical spine and your lumbar spine are just the same thing, really, just different ends of the spine. So really, we're just trying to lengthen the spine, to straighten it out as much as we can. And that just requires our legs to receive us. Otherwise, the legs are pushing up and pushing the sacrum up, and the spine then just buckles because you've got gravity pushing down and you pushing up. So you have to allow this through the legs, yeah? Yeah, so the chin in, that's the thing that John didn't get. Yeah, how terrible his posture was with this sort of leaning forwards and his chin jutting forwards. So then that's the aggression of the natural fighter. John was a natural fighter. He was always jutting his chin forwards and challenging the world to sock him one. And so just feel, it's a humble gesture. Your eyes are cast down, you're pulling the chin in. And so you're being humble in relation to what's in front of you, but you're actually extending up to the heavens through the spine. And it's only when you do this that this can drop down properly. They depend upon each other. The two ends of the spine are the same. Your head has to pull up in order for your tail to pull down. And if you're interested in this, then just meditate, just sit on a cushion. Because if you get the chin in and you're sitting, you just can't think. That's why people hate it, yeah? They almost feel like nothing's happening, yeah? Because they can't even, not only can they not think, they can't even register what's happening, yeah? And so they think nothing's happening, you know, because they want to feel, you know, when they're meditating, oh yes, I can feel all quiet and I can feel blissful and all that shit. You don't want to feel anything, you just want to be. You want to be this transmitter and receiver. Okay, and now let's just step a bit. So just get it going to start with. Ooh, just feel the legs, yay. The floor's all wobbly. And just using the stepping leg to pull yourself into it. And then just bounce out of it. Yeah, so you just get it going. We're stepping forwards and stepping back. And we want to make sure that we're not running on momentum. And so what we do, you put the toes down and you just pause. And then you pull yourself into the foot. And then this is a bit like momentum because you bounce out. It's like a ball hitting the ground, deforming, and then suddenly having to go back to its old shape. And that forces a bounce up. So here I pause, and then I draw myself in. And you can feel yourself sort of squashing, and then that squashing just wants to come back to its normal shape, and that will throw you out. So I step, toes, not the heel yet, and then pull with the toes and then settle into the heel. As you settle into the heel, it allows you to spring back. Toes, don't move into it until you make that decision. You don't fall into the foot. That's the big no-no. So here and pull and bounce out. You know, so the bending leg will eventually want to straighten, and the straightening leg will eventually want to bend. So that's yin and yang. Excess of yang produces yin. And I draw into it. Yes, it's got a real delicacy. A bit like the delicacy of twisting the foot in order to turn. So that's basically just trying to do without momentum as well. As soon as we move, because we have mass, then the body will pick up momentum. But we don't want it to be that takes us into the next moment. It's our listening. It's our yielding. And then just bring your attention to the supporting leg, which has a passive role at the moment. And just feel, if I just allow myself to bounce across, I will settle on top of the leg. So the leg is almost begrudgingly holding me. Yeah? So what I have to do, I want my weight not just to settle on top, but to get through to the foot. So the leg, this leg has to have a sense of pulling. It's greedy for the weight. Yeah? So the legs are squabbling not to get rid of your weight, but to swallow it up. Both legs want the weight. Otherwise, we'd be coming up all the time, which of course is what most people do. We want to be sinking all the time. So this leg is hungry for my weight, and the weight passes through to the ground, and it bounces. So this has to really swallow me up. Yeah, so in Tai Chi, there's no such thing as passive, really. Even the part that seems to be passive is really actively passive. So it's like active passive rather than passive aggressive. So, yeah. So when you just work really sort of delicately and finely, then you generate spirit. So you've got this sort of lifting energy that's coming from the ground all the time, which is generated really by your real care and attention and your listening. And it's a bit like a flamboyance, like the flamboyance of the artist. That's it. So the movement doesn't come out of you. The movement is called. So this foot is calling me to come to it. This foot is calling me to come to it. You remember Scaramouche, John's cat? Yeah, so when we lived in Blakeney, he had a sort of route that he would take through the house, this cat, sort of sniffing out, making sure there'd be no intruders. So he'd just take the same route every time. And John always used to marvel that he'd go about it as though it was the first time each time. So he was really vigilant and really sort of attentive. There'd be none of this, oh, I've done all this before, none of this sort of human ego thing. So that's what we want. We're doing an exercise we've done loads of times before, but it's new. So that quote of Iris Murdoch, you know, the complete awfulness of the absolutely new. So, you know, in the sense that in those days, awful didn't just mean horrible, it also just meant full of awe, you know, what the Americans would say, awesome, before the word awesome existed. Yeah, so this is the power of spirit. It makes things new. It generates novelty. Okay, now let's just try it on the other side. Yeah, so always just start fresh. Yeah. Just start it right from the beginning. Don't try and reproduce what you've just done. And, you know, you'd like it to take you somewhere a bit different if we're really interested in novelty. Yeah. It's exactly the same if you wanted to touch something really gently and you'd touch it with the fingers first. And you'd just wait and you'd listen and you'd register. And you'd feel just how much pressure you could put on it without hurting it or breaking it. Because you'd sort, you know, if you put too much, you'd feel it creaking, a bit like when you put your feet on ice. You can tell whether the ice is going to hold you or not. Famous last words. And again, just register the two spaces. So your ward-off space, and then the rest of the room, which is also your domain. Yeah, it's also part of you. Now that's really why John's posture is bad. Why his chin jutted forwards? Because he was seeping into this all the time. There's that bit in like Fist of Fury, Bruce Lee. There's a bit at the end where he's prowling through this house looking for the baddie who is armed with a sword. And his posture, you know, he's like this. He's just walking around like this with his head just sticking forwards, because that really brings his awareness out. So he's aware not just of what he sees, but of what he feels. Yeah. So we want to have a sense of this sort of pulling in. Yeah. So there's a sense that not only are you withdrawing from your own space, you're also withdrawing from this big space a bit. You don't want to get too engrossed by it, too captured by it. Ooh. Yes, especially when you step backwards, just make sure you don't fall into the foot. So this is relatively easy pulling here. But then as soon as I put my back foot down, I tend to fall into it. So just pause in here and then draw. And just feel how when you pull with the foot, you're basically drawing the spine down into the leg. So it's that really helps make the leg just an extension of the spine and draw the tailbone under a little bit, or the coccyx rather. So when you pull the ground, you're actively lengthening your lower back. So here I'm stretching my lower back and the rest of me follows. Okay, now let's just bring it back. Again, the sacrum forwards and this feeling that its natural path is down towards the knees. And then can you just sort of melt, can you melt down into it? Rather than have these two legs propping you up, yeah? And then just bring it up to attention. And then just straightening the legs, but without pushing the sacrum. I still want this sense that the sacrum is melting through. And if the legs have to remain quite a bit bent for that, then so be it. That doesn't really matter. And just feel the ground. If you can really feel your feet really sort of big, like a hobbit's feet, and almost wriggly on the ground, then the chances are you've got your bum in properly. Yeah, so the part of you that is most full of life is your legs and your feet. That's where the energy is. And then the energy comes up into the upper body by turning the waist. And the upper body just has to remain really relaxed and clear so that this energy can just whip up. So you're not constructed here. You're constructed from the ground. That's all the hardness you need is the ground. You don't need any hardness here, any structure. So my students tell me how much they love nature. So, if you really love nature, then why don't you get out of here and into there? That would really demonstrate your love. They don't really love nature, they just love what nature gives them. Yeah. Okay, so let's finish.